Was it hard to be a co-leader when you weren't actually an MP in the House?
It was a little bit, yeah. I mean, it had its problems in terms of not being part of the kind of central political game of the country, I guess. On the other hand, it freed me up a bit more from a lot of the parliamentary duties so that I could focus on some campaigning issues. You know, I spent 5 hours in Select Committee yesterday, and so those kinds of things take up a lot of time. So it was a bit of one, you know, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other.
But it's a long way from a housing commission house in a housing commission suburb in Brisbane, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. My mum was stoked.
Did she come over for the?
Yeah, she did. Yeah. Me and my brother chipped in the airfare, so she could come over, and she loved it. So, you know, it's good to make your mum proud.
So you were one of 6?
Yeah, I was the last of 6.
Yeah. So grew up in a household then, I guess, where a budget was fairly tight.
Yeah, I mean, it was a 3-bedroom household. There's 4 boys, 2 girls, so me and my 3 brothers shared the same bedroom. We had 2 double bunks, and so yeah, that was an experience. and you know, we later in life we were better off. Like eventually, my father, you know, he got a better income and stuff. But particularly while he was studying, yeah, things were pretty tight. And you know, my mum stretched the budget out and kept us all in food. And I mean, you know, I was the last one, so I think I suffered the least, actually. But I think it was pretty hard for my brothers and sisters.
Do you think coming from a background like that with a tight domestic budget, has that changed the way your politics run, the way you view things?
Yeah, I've no doubt it did. I mean, you can't help but be influenced by where you come from. And, you know, I was acutely aware of our class position, if you like, or, you know, our position in society and how we compared to others. And that certainly influenced my politics. I'm sure, you know, it did, I'm sure, push me in a kind of left-wing direction, if you like. Yeah.
Your maiden speech, you mentioned Michael Savage in reference to the welfare state, for want of a better phrase. Do you think we've lost sight of his vision?
I do. I think that, you know, Savage's applied Christianity, or his love, you know, he openly spoke about love for his fellow human beings. I think that we have lost sight of that. We've become very focused on economics. Economics dominates the discourse, the political discourse, and I think people drop off the discourse sometimes. You don't hear so much about them, particularly the poorest, and I think that's a tragedy, actually. And you know, I think that it's not forever, and you know, the Greens and hopefully others in other parties will push it back on the agenda.
Because I read somewhere one of the things you said was that we reap what we sow in Bridge Parr and South Auckland. What did you mean by that?
We went through a new right revolution in this country in the 80s and 90s. I mean, it was an extraordinary period. It's produced extraordinary inequality. And all of those neoliberal economic programs, they always do. That's what they're set up to do, aside from other things. And the result of inequality is poverty and crime. We know that inequality is one of the key drivers of poor health and poor educational outcomes and further inequality, and also one of the key drivers of crime. So we are reaping what we sowed. And so if we don't want people in 20 years' time to reap more, then, you know, we need to make the investments to get rid of inequality or reduce inequality and get rid of poverty and make that one of our #1 targets. How about that for a target, you know? We want to get rid of poverty in our lifetimes. That'd be a great thing to do.
So what then would you say were the key issues with the election coming up?
Well, for us, what we're always looking for is, you know, we have like this dual kaupapa of social justice and environmental sustainability, and so we're always looking for solutions that bring both together. And so, for example, with rising petrol prices, which is, you know, one of the drivers of poverty, or, you know, it's a real problem for people, we'd look at public transport as, you know, and promoting public transport as a way that not only reduces greenhouse emissions, but also makes it easier for people to get around. We'd also be looking at what I'd call straight social justice issues, like the in-work payment that discriminates against beneficiaries and is throwing a lot of the children of beneficiaries into poverty, which just seems silly to me. I think we're going to be looking at inevitably a number of economic issues, and for us it's about how do we build a resilient economy, which has, has quite a high degree of localised and New Zealand production, so it's got a lot of strength, but also builds on the clean and green 100% pure brand that underpins our economy in the long term. I'm sure that I could keep going, but I'm sure that also, no doubt, crime is going to be part of it, and we've kind of talked about how we think about talking about the causes of crime is critical. You can't just say lock them up. All the research shows that lock them up and throw away the key makes things worse in terms of the long run. It doesn't solve anything. So you have to look at the causes of crime. There's those kind of issues. Greenhouse emissions for us is going to be key. How do you reducing greenhouse emissions? And personally, one of the ones that I've been campaigning on really strongly is water quality. I think that one of the great environmental issues for our country right now is the declining water quality, and I think we need to fix that up. So there's some of the issues. There'll be lots of others.
I know that many in the business community, though, are very leery of trusting the Greens. They see the emission trading as something that's just going to cost them money for not much return. How will you work with the business community?
Well, I think the business community is divided, actually. You might say Business New Zealand seems to be pretty much in denial about the need to do anything about climate change. I mean, they kind of acknowledge they need to do something, but every time you put up a concrete proposal, they're against it. But then you have something like the New Zealand Business Council for Sustainable Development, which is very pro it. And then you have the Sustainable Business Network, which is even greener. So I think that there is a big move within the business community to understand that climate change in particular is a real issue, and we need to reduce our emissions, and there are opportunities in that as well as costs, because one person's cost is another person's profit. So we have if we want to, we can take advantage of that. It's up to us, because the world is going to move on. There's no turning back now about reducing emissions. It's going to happen. So
after a term of being in a coalition with the Labour Party.
We haven't been in coalition.
Oh, that's right. You've been supporting.
We've been abstaining on confidence and supply.
Right. What would you like to see as the legacy of the Greens, having supported Labour through these last few years?
Well, if I can just disagree with your assumptions, in the first term we voted for Labour on confidence and supply. In the second term we voted against Labour on confidence and supply, and in the current term we're abstaining. Though to be fair, the abstention is kind of critical to them staying in government, so it's a fair point. But we've had a different relationship with Labour each time. We've tried to get out of it whatever we could as we went along, and it wasn't easy because Labour doesn't have a lot of sympathy for our positions. Sustainability is something you use in speeches. It's not something you put in budgets for them. So we've tried to use whatever leverage. And the kinds of things we've got, for example, the energy efficiency and conservation strategy, which should result in much more fuel-efficient cars coming into New Zealand in the future. That will probably be one of the most significant outcomes. We voted to protect ACC back in '99, and we'll see what National does about that. We provided the votes to do that. We provided the votes on KiwiSaver. We've made some progress. Like we've got an environmental defence fund, so when small community groups are up against big multinationals, which happen, or big developers, which happens all the time, they can access a bit of legal aid. Things like that, I think, have helped lots of communities. I'd like to think the campaign we're currently running around water will result in the beginnings of the cleaning up of our water. We've also, I think, been part of unwinding some of the new right, make the poor suffer stuff that happened in the 80s and 90s. I mean, we've been part of voting for those budgets and putting pressure on around those issues. There's a few other private members' bills we've done, like, flexible working hours, so people can have flexible working hours if they've got dependent kids. I think that's a great thing. Getting rid of youth wages, that was a good thing. I think that there's a whole list of stuff like that. But the big structural things are probably around energy. I think if we can make structural changes around energy, then that would be a great legacy. We'll see how far we've got with that.
Great. Well, Dr. Norman, thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.